My dear family, in Judaism, or in other words, in the religion that the Jewish people follow, in the religion that the Jews follow, they follow God revealed through His law and through His prophets. Or in other words, in Judaism, they follow and believe God through what the law says and through what the prophets say. One of those prophets and lawgivers was Moses from the Old Testament. Part of that law revealed to the Jews, or in other words, revealed to the Israelites, is what we call the Mosaic Law, or the Law of Moses, given by Moses. The law that was communicated by God to the Jews through Moses. We find this law of Moses in the first 5 books of the Bible. And today, my dear family, today we read from one of those books in the first reading. In today's first reading, we read from the book of Leviticus, one of the books that talks about the Mosaic Law, or the law revealed to the Israelites through Moses. The purpose of this law, we hear in today's reading, is to lead the Israelites to the promised land and to honor God. Today, in today's gospel, we read how the Pharisees criticized Jesus' disciples because they do not follow this law. In the law of Moses, which is the law that the Pharisees are referring to, there are close to 600 laws. One of those laws is to wash their hands before eating a meal. The Pharisees notice that Jesus' disciples do not follow that law, and they start criticizing Jesus because they do not follow it. They are criticizing Him for not being a faithful Jew, for not washing His hands before eating a meal. They criticize Him for violating the law of Moses and hence setting Himself against God in not doing so. In other words, the Pharisees and the scribes criticize Jesus for not honoring God. However, Jesus replies back by admonishing them, by calling them to repentance, by calling their sin, which is hypocrisy. Jesus calls them out and says, "You hypocrites." The purpose of the law, my dear family, is to lead us into paradise and to lead us into union with God. The purpose of the law is not to just follow the law for the sake of following the law, but it is for the sake of loving God and neighbor. The Pharisees seem to be more preoccupied about the law than their relationship with God. It is almost as if they will be criticizing poetry for not following proper grammar. The purpose of grammar is to help us to communicate in said language. The purpose of grammar in a language is not to just follow the rules, despite the purpose of the grammar. And the purpose of grammar is to communicate. If we follow grammar for the sake of grammar, then we will not have poetry, nor even be able to speak other languages. The purpose of grammar is to communicate in that particular language. In the same way, my dear family, the purpose of God's law, the purpose of God's commandments works in the same way. The purpose is to lead us to God and into relationship with Him in heaven. Not to just follow the laws for the sake of following them. Jesus does not criticize the Pharisees and scribes for not following the law. No. However, He does criticize them for following the law for the sake of following the law, despite its purpose. Sometimes we too may fall into that temptation. We too may sometimes get stuck in following the law for the sake of the law, despite its purpose, despite it not fulfilling its purpose. Yes, we need to follow the law. Yes, we need to follow the grammar. But we need to do so for the sake of speaking the language, for the sake of communicating. And the language of a Christian is love. Love of God and love of neighbor. Its grammar is the law, God's laws and commandments. We follow them for the sake of loving God and neighbor, not just for the sake of following the law despite its purpose. Then, my dear family, let us not be preoccupied with following the law despite its purpose or forgetting its purpose. Otherwise, we too may risk becoming hypocrites like the scribes and the Pharisees, who call out others for not following the law, who call out others for not following the commandments, while at the same time we do not speak the language. Following the grammar without speaking the language is what defiles us. It is what ruins us from within. My dear family, we follow the law for the sake of loving God and loving neighbor. We do not follow it without forgetting its purpose. Do we speak the language of love, or are we just following its grammar?